As a person interested in Conlangs, and a mid-level Esperantist, you can't help but know who L.L. Zamenhof is. Ask an Esperantist what Esperanto is, and they're probably going to tell you about Zamenhof as well. Esperantists love to talk about Zamenhof. But Ido? My idea on how Ido came into be is a little more fuzzy. I'm curious, so let's learn a little bit about Ido. Ido is the offspring of Esperanto. Esperanto itself was published back in 1887, meant to be a universal second language, as a way to break down language barriers. Esperanto was solely created by L.L. Zamenhof. In Bialystok, where he lived, there were Russians, Poles, Germans, and Jews, and apparently they didn't get along. His hope was, in creating a common language that each group could speak, it would create harmony. Evidently, Zam didn't hang out with modern Esperantists. A number of revisions were suggested for Esperanto over time, including a revision that Zamenhof himself proposed, but was rejected by the community at large. Some of the changes in reformed Esperanto made its way into Ido, which is the most well-known Esperantito, or offspring of Esperanto. Ido came into the picture in 1907, 20 years after the creation of Esperanto. At the time, there were several planned languages out there in the world, including Volapük, Latin without inflections, idiom neutral, as well as Esperanto. The Delegation for the Adoption of an International Auxiliary Language was founded in 1901 by Louis Couturat and Léopold Liot. Couturat was a French logician, mathematician, philosopher, and linguist, and Liot was a French mathematician. The delegation made a request to the International Association of Academies in Vienna to choose one international language to endorse. However, this request was rejected. The delegation moved on to become a committee of academics to discuss the adoption of a standard international language. There ended up being 12 members of the delegation, which were all men. Yay! The committee heard from representatives of various planned languages. Of note, Louis de Beaufort was selected to represent vanilla Esperanto. Giuseppe Piano supported Latin without inflections. The delegation got together to discuss which international auxiliary language should be chosen for international use, and they investigated several languages, including Esperanto, Bolak, Spokhil, idiom neutral, and Latin without inflections, as well as an anonymously submitted proposal to a reformed Esperanto project using the pen name Ido. The committee was warned by various Esperantists, including Zamenhof, that such a committee had no authority to decide and impose an international language, and I think that the conclusion was widely disregarded by all but the eventual Idists after the fact. The committee came up with 3 conditions established for any language to be chosen. It must be capable of serving the needs of science in addition to everyday life, commerce, and general communication. It must be able to be easily learned by all people of average education, and especially those of civilized nations of Europe, and it must not be a living language. In the end, the committee concluded that no language was completely acceptable, and Esperanto was selected, albeit provided that certain reforms were to be made with the agreement of the Esperanto Linguistic Committee. In the aftermath, however, the Esperanto Linguistic Committee either declined to discuss reforms to Esperanto, or was unable to, due to the 1-month time limit set by the delegation. After the lack of action, the delegation broke ties with Orthodox Esperanto. Burning bridges probably didn't help out the relationship between the Esperantists and the future Idists, and it was later revealed that the anonymous author of the Ido proposal was Louis de Beaufort, cooperating with Louis Couturat. Since Bufront had initially been part of the Esperanto movement and was selected for the delegation to represent original, vanilla, unchanged Esperanto, the revelation that he had collaborated on the proposal for the Edo project caused additional controversy. He became known somewhat as a Judas in Esperanto circles. But the Esperanto world seems to have a hard time with forgiveness to those who abandon it. The delegation, now independent of the expectations of any Esperanto committee, put into place a group to begin working on Edo. The committee formed to flesh out the Edo language was headed by Bufront and Kucherat. According to idolinguo.org.uk, the committee also included Ido Jespersen, Richard Lorenz, and Vilhelm Oswald. The Union of Friends of the International Language and an Edo Academy were also established early on in Edo's history. After the creation of Edo, there were people in the Esperanto movement who defected to the Edo side. It appears that the general public still preferred Esperanto, while leaders in the Esperanto culture were more often interested in Edo. Apparently around 20% of Esperantist leaders moved to Edo, while only 3% of everyday Esperantists did. It was said that the Edists were generals without an army, and the Esperantists were an army with no generals. In the early 1900s, it seemed like both Esperanto and Edo were growing and doing well. Edo, however, was hit by a few problems that halted its growth up until the age of the internet. A sudden, unfortunate car accident killed Louis Kucherat in 1914. In addition to this, World War I had also had an effect on both Esperanto and Edo worlds. The Edo Academy was suspended between 1914 and 1920. Then, in 1928, Ido Jespersen, who was a contributor to the delegation and the language itself, defected again to publish and support his own planned language, Novial. It turns out that world wars hurt the idealism behind international languages, and the hope for world harmony that is usually behind them. Esperanto survived both wars, though Esperantists were targeted in Nazi Germany and in Soviet Russia, where Stalin called it a language of spies. Esperanto continued throughout the 1900s, but I think that the initial roadblocks in the Edo movement stunted its growth, leaving Edo history seemingly silent throughout the same period. There might be more history to uncover regarding Edo if I were fluent enough to read through the Edo Language Wikipedia, so if I find out more about this time period, I'll create another video in the future. With the popularity of the internet, many constructed languages that had become obscure now thrive again, even if their communities are still relatively small. Digital versions of books in the Edo language can now be found online, free lessons are more readily available for anyone to learn, and social groups and chat rooms have popped up in various places. There is definitely less to choose from when it comes to Edo versus Esperanto, but there are resources out there, including the Edo language site of Wikipedia, where you can find a lot of reading material. Perhaps with increased visibility and more people learning, others will be inspired to continue creating original content, or translate existing content into Edo. I will leave you with some links to various resources that you can use to learn more about Edo, study the language, and socialize with other Edists online. If you're interested in collaborating on video projects about the Edo language, please let me know and maybe we can work on something. I personally like to work on programming games, making comics, and creating cartoons and videos, though I only have so much spare time, so it would be nice to work with others. You can find me on Facebook or Twitter, or just email me directly. I spent several hours going through Wikipedia and trying to find other accounts and histories about Edo, but they were kinda hard to come by, and it's still a little fuzzy and unclear to me. I guess I have a better understanding of what actually went on, but I couldn't find much about, the process of creating the language itself. Now, I know there's, comparisons between Edo and Esperanto, but I was kind of interested in, the committee and how they worked and all of that. One thing that I find disappointing is that the delegation was made up of all men, and yeah, it's the 1900s, but so often it seems like people are inventing languages and they don't really like cast a wide net to try to include others, other points of view and other backgrounds and everything else. It was pretty much just European men. I don't really think that a true auxiliary language can really be for everybody without the input of different cultures, genders, and backgrounds. And you can even look at something like Laodon, which was invented by a woman in the 1980s, and it still has problematic features. I like the idea of a Conlang being created by a community of people, and while Edo is a neat language, I think it's worth learning if you like planned languages. It's still far from perfect, or at least far from what I would consider to be the perfect Conlang for being an auxiliary language for everybody in the world, for all people. Well, that's all I have for now. I would like to do more videos about Edo as time permits and study the language more and maybe create some stuff, but I'm not sure what 2016 even has in store for me personally, so we'll see what happens. So, till revido, danko por rigardar. I'm not very good at it. It sounds funny to me. It sounds like I can say dankon por rigardi and I sound fine, but if I say danko por rigardar, I feel like I'm rolling my R's a lot.